Hi there, I'm Anna Seisling, host of Great Lakes Now. Joining me right now for a really special conversation is William Hart, the director of a documentary about the Flint water crisis called Lead and Copper. Will, it's really great to have you with us today.
Thank you. It's really great to be here.
So I wonder if you can tell me a little bit, just to sort of start us off, why did you decide to make this film? It just came out pretty recently. The Flint water crisis is something that people have been talking about and aware of for quite some time. So is it a matter of timeline or just the amount of time it took to make this film? Why make a film about the Flint water crisis in 2023?
Well, we started it in 2016, and initially the idea was to have it done sooner, but we really there's a very, very small team, and we basically self-funded most of the movie ourselves. So that meant that it took a long time to finish it. And, with the Flint water crisis being its 10th year anniversary of the start, in April of next year, we knew that we wanted to get it out and ready to screen around that time. And so, when we finished it last year, we were really excited that we would be screening it through the year as we got closer to the 10th anniversary.
The highest we saw was 13,200 parts per billion, which is almost 3 times hazardous waste level.
And you sort of, I think, maybe answered my next question in your response just now, but there has been so much coverage in the last several years about the Flint water crisis. What do you feel like makes Lead and Copper different from some of the other programs and content that have come out around the crisis in Flint?
Sure. So I think a lot of the other coverage has been really good, but what we've always wanted to do is show as big of a story that we could have with the Flint water crisis and how policies that were enacted almost 50 years ago could have led to an environmental crisis or an infrastructure crisis or health crisis today. And so we don't really, I think our federal and our state policies are constantly battling with what's going to be better for the bottom line versus what's going to be better for our citizens. And in reality, the more you invest into something like water quality and water infrastructure, the better it's going to be in the long term. And another part about the Lead and Copper that I think was missing from a lot of other coverage was the fact of the emergency manager law and how the emergency manager was basically a, czar that takes over the city, as Joel Fike said in the movie. And that removes the democratic process from a municipality and a community. And that's, to me, anti-constitutional or unconstitutional. And the other thing is that this policy is not just specific to Flint. There are other examples of the democratic process being removed in different places around the country. And one of the symptoms of that is going to be more health crises like the Flint water crisis.
Why did you decide to call this film Lead and Copper?
Yeah, so initially we called it The Water Canary, which was my composer's idea. But the title Lead and Copper really stuck as an option, I guess, during one of our first interviews, which was at the very end with Leon Al-Amin of MAID Institute, where he talks about how he survived being shot in the head in front of his mother's house. And the lead and copper rule is the rule that limits the amount of lead and copper in a public drinking supply. But lead poisoning, as well as gun violence, as well as all the other issues that affect disenfranchised community are all the same sort of violence in my mind. It doesn't matter whether someone's getting sick from something that's coming out of their faucet or coming out of their shower, or if someone's affected by a lack of infrastructure or the lack of schools or the lack of safety in their community. It's all the same sort of violence to me.
Mm-hmm. And I want to ask you now about the sort of aspect of the film that is really complex and provides this sort of interweaving of all these different perspectives. There are so many different faces and voices and perspectives that are featured in the Lead and Copper film, but also some of these narratives, as the story kind of unfolds, are not necessarily complementary of each other. You know, in some ways, I guess there's a lot of conflict and kind of voices coming up against one another in looking at kind of where things went wrong and how all of this really deteriorated. So how did you go about, you know, doing these interviews, telling this story, and then deciding when, where, and how to bring all these different perspectives together?
I mean, it was really difficult to kind of weave together what interviews and what people we wanted to include. There came a point in shooting it that we knew that we were going to be cutting people out. And we did end up going back to kind of our first few interviews and including them, especially the people from Flint, Janae and Tim and Leon. It was important, first of all, for me to, as an outsider, not a Michigan resident, not you know, a Flint resident, it was very important for me to have the most holistic and accurate emotional and informational response and telling of the story. But it also was important that when we were telling the story, we could weave all of the policies and ideas and concepts that have been present in cities like Flint and cities like Newark and Washington, D.C. and elsewhere in the country, how that affects people just beyond, you know, their water quality. And so, and to not make it something where it would be, you know, trauma porn for someone watching it, we really just wanted to be as straightforward and specific as possible.
I think just sort of one final thing I wanted to touch on with you about the particular voices and perspectives in this film is the fact that I think it is really easy to look at residents of Flint as victims, which, you know, in so many ways they have been from this Flint water crisis. There are lives, neurological development, so many things that have just been irreversibly impacted by this lead-tainted water. The other thing, though, is that there's so much resilience and strength and determination and fortitude within that community. And I also felt like you did a really nice job of showcasing those voices, too. Especially even, you know, one thing I hadn't thought of prior to seeing the film is just the influx of water bottles. And then what happens with those water bottles? And is it going to lead to more litter, more trash? And then there's actually a resident that you feature in the film who's thinking about that. Can you talk a little bit about sort of finding moments of like weaving hope and strength into the story as well?
Yeah, I mean, there was no way we were going to make this movie and not show how strong and how resilient and how powerful. And I really have to commend, again, I can't stop saying this, but Tim, Janae, and Leon. And when they saw the movie, they were really happy about that. And I was ecstatic. That's what was most important to me, is that the people of Flint who were in the movie enjoyed the movie. I always knew that there was a possibility that I could have made a really sad movie about people being poisoned into their victims. But that is not the case, because the people of Flint are the people who brought this story to the light and stood up to the state and the federal government saying something is wrong. They are the heroes.
It's hijacking, where people have elected their officials locally, and then their power is completely taken away.
And that's kind of like a big message I wanted to have out of the film, that this is a call to action, that it's up to us as citizens, that if we see something is unjust, we have the right and the duty to be able to act on it. And it's difficult because it seems like there's so much powers against you. But if it's something as big as the Flint water crisis, you can experience justice in some sort of way. Now, justice, I think, is still being prolonged, and that a lot of charges have been dropped recently. But EPA has recently announced that they are going to try and replace all the lead lines in the country in the next decade. So that is a form of justice, and hopefully more justice is to come.
Well, William Hart, director of the film Lead and Copper, I really appreciate you for joining Great Lakes Now and talking with me a little bit about this film. I'm really grateful.
Thank you very much. This has been great.